Hello all. So we are very excited to take you through practical Splunk Zero to Hero session. So in we are going to cover 7 lessons in particular. So I'm just going to give you a little bit of briefing. So in the Splunk platform, we are going to have introduction for the Splunk components as well. However, in the fourth part, we are going to see basically how to install Splunk and how I will also be sharing the downloadable links as well. And we will also be ingesting the Splunk tutorial data. However, if all the other lessons from lesson number 2 to the lesson number 7, we have got everything a practical demonstration to be covered. Uh, so just give me a little bit of second. And if I, okay. So in the lesson number 1, we are going to cover why Splunk, components of the Splunk, uses of the Splunk, and in the very fourth part, I will be taking you through how to install Splunk and set up Splunk. So why is Splunk? What is Splunk? So it is nothing but a big data platform and for machine data, which basically converts our raw unstructured data into the searchable events, and indexers basically make converts this unstructured data into the searchable events. We will look into that in a little bit. So organize data into the indexes. You can also draw analogy from the tables in SQL. You get and it also enables a user with a capability so that users can create dashboards, alerts, and reports. Okay, so if so, what is machine data? Machine data is nothing but a digital exhaust produced by the servers, applications, network devices, etc. So some of the machine data examples we might be referring to web access logs, for example, your Nginx logs, your Apache server logs, your IIS service logs. Application logs might be pertaining to certain applications in general. Your endpoint related logs pertaining to the Windows 10 or Windows 11. If you have captured a TCP dump, network packet capture as well. OS performance metrics might be referring to your throughput, your compute, your storage for that matter. And so we can derive some of the hidden value out of the machine data. And so, for example, we are going to ask some of the questions. Is there a latency in my application? So these two questions are from the ops standpoint. So I will be mentioning ops. Is there a latency in my application? What is the error rate of my application service? And then we can also ask questions from the security standpoint. Where is the DOS attempts coming from? How many login attempts of the by providing the wrong usernames? So it has also got some of the use cases with respect to the security as well, right? Okay, so let me move on to the next slide. There might be certain problems with respect to the machine data. So for example, the volume of the machine data might be very, very huge, and the speed at which this kind of the data might be getting generated, and that might also be very, very fast. So we are referring to the unstructured data. So with respect to the unstructured data, we have got a lot of Splunk add-ons to really parse the data in some of the meaningful formats. So for example, your data corresponding to the firewalls, we have got add-ons with respect to all the firewall related vendors, similarly distributed, right? So the data is not really coming from one of the monolith application. It is basically coming from let's assume that there might be ample amount of microservices and data is basically making to the Splunk environment. So therefore, there are certain challenges with respect to that. Splunk to rescue. So Splunk basically enables or indexes data from any source to enable searching, reporting, and visualizing at scale. So let me clear that stuff. So this is how the Splunk architecture look like. So just give me a second. So you can see that we are basically talking about certain components of the Splunk. So starting from, these might be the sources with respect to the Splunk. So for example, we might have servers, Linux servers or Windows servers. We might have applications, we might have network devices, we might have sensors. So there are two ways of basically starting with the Splunk. Either you can install Splunk D as a process into the host system itself, which might need to forward the logs into the Splunk platform. But the more common method is we basically, so for example, if I were to take an example of Windows servers, so we basically enable event log forwarding, Windows event log forwarding, we can call it as, and this logs are getting forwarded to what we can call it as universal forwarder. We can also call these particular forwarders as Windows collectors, and similarly we can have Linux universal forwarders to which so we can also configure syslog for the Unix based services to basically forward the logs to the universal forwarders. So this is one of the common ways of doing it. And in the universal forwarders, you can see that our Splunk D is one of the process which might be running at all that times. So in the universal forwarders, the data might be residing for, let's say, 24 hours or 48 hours, not beyond that, right? So the data will be getting stored or will be residing on the universal forwarders for certain amount of time, and then the data will be getting forwarded to the indexers. And for the long term, the data will be getting stored in what we call it as Splunk indexers. So Splunk D as a process will be running in Splunk indexers as well. So in the Splunk indexers, all the parsing or the data might be getting segregated into the various buckets. We are going to talk about that in a bit. And so basically, i- this is where the data is getting data resides in the various buckets. We are going to talk about that. And then we also have got something known as search head. So search head is nothing but you can say, it is nothing but the graphical user interface for Splunk users or Splunk Power users for that matter. So we will be performing majority of our operations in the Splunk search head itself. So if we are going to run or execute any of the search jobs, it is going to get distributed into the one of the Splunk indexes, and it is going to perform one of our search and coming back with the data which is getting stored in one of the buckets. So here you can see that here we are as a Splunk user or Splunk Power user or Splunk administrator. So let me clear this particular stuff. And so talking about a little bit of the components, and again, you can see that indexer is the one of the component which is basically responsible for receiving data from client. Your client can be anything, server, applications, network devices. And so indexer is basically responsible for converting your raw data into the searchable events. And this is where your search is getting executed, right? Though we have got a search head as a user interface, but search head only distributes our searches to the indexer, and our search jobs will be getting executed in the form of indexer itself, right? So let me so search head, as we have suggested previously, it's nothing but the GUI for the user. It basically manages searches. It basically distributes searches to the indexers. This is where we basically maintains access control, right? Let me clear that stuff. So universal forwarders is nothing but which is responsible for collecting data from machine data host as and keeps track of data ingestion. So it is very, very light and can be installed as a part of your sensor. Uh, So inside an indexer, what really happens probably, Splunk basically stores data from the long-term perspective. It is where data basically resides. And as we have discussed or in a brief that the data is basically getting categorized or stored in form of various buckets, hot, warm, and cold. We are going to discuss about that in a bit. So data buckets contain raw data and index files. So buckets usually contains raw data, and we can also configure data retention policies at the index level as well. And what are they? We are going to discuss in a bit. So these are the buckets basically. So let me clear this, and yeah. So these are the data buckets, and we are also looking at the life cycle of these buckets as well. So hot bucket is something where your live data is getting ingested, or your live data which is getting ingested is being written on the hot buckets, or it's getting stored on the hot bucket. So for example, your data, for example, 24 hours data, right, will be getting stored here, and once this particular duration is getting completed, your data might be getting rolled from your hot bucket to the warm bucket. So your this duration basically depends how your administrators configure in your Splunk environment. It might range from a day or two, 24 hours to 48 hours of the duration, and from there on your data might be getting rolled to what we call it as warm bucket. So warm bucket is again, we are basically making the use of the faster storage, because we really want the data retrieval to be taking a very less amount of time. And the warm bucket is an example, and you are basically able to read data from the warm bucket, will not be able to write data which is getting stored in the warm bucket for that matter. So in certain duration, your data will be getting rolled to the cold buckets once again. And for the cold buckets, you can basically use a storage which is a little cheaper to save on the cost, because you might not be worried about very fast data retrieval times. And then based on your lifecycle policy, your data can either be archived to the what we call it as frozen bucket, or this is nothing but the frozen bucket, or by default your data can be deleted once data is getting rolled from cold bucket, right? So by default the data will be getting deleted, but you can also configure to store the data once it is getting rolled from the cold bucket. It can be archived and stored in the frozen bucket. So let me clear this stuff. So as you can see, little bit about of the hot bucket. Its newest data opens for both read and write. And so I should be moving to the next. Talking about the warm buckets, so it is only open for the read-only related operations, so no writes are possible. As you can see here, hot and warm buckets are kept in the usually in the faster storage. So cold buckets again, it's only open for the read-only related operations. You can basically utilize a cheaper kind of the storage, and depending on the configuration, data from cold buckets can either be deleted or archived to the frozen buckets, which we were really looking at. So let me clear this stuff. So frozen bucket, here the data is not really searchable, and we need to really thaw that particular data first using the Splunk provided script. Splunk security, a little bit of the housekeeping stuff. Splunk basically implements role-based access control, three primary roles: a user, power, and admin. And power user can share knowledge objects, and for Splunk user, they can have private knowledge objects as well. So what are knowledge objects? Some of the examples might be field extractions, lookups, data models, and tags. So a lot of with respect to the knowledge object is coming in the subsequent slides. Other Splunk components which you might be looking at. So deployment server is nothing but which might be responsible for managing the configuration on your universal forwarders. So just remember, license master is basically responsible for keeping the active license. So for example, how much of the data is getting ingested into your Splunk environment in a day: 5 terabytes of the data, 10 terabytes of the data, depending on the organization. Heavy forwarder is nothing but, so heavy forwarder is also responsible for not only indexing data, but it can also parse data as well, right? So that is what is getting differentiated from the universal forwarder. So apart from indexing data, it can also parse data. The monitoring console is just for admins, just remember. So for example, you can basically perform the health checks for your Splunk forwarders, universal forwarders, your heavy forwarders, your indexers, or your search heads. So you can basically look at operational metrics with respect to your indexers and search heads. So it is basically used for the administrations or Splunk administrators. search head deployer. It is just to manage your search head. So for example, your organization might have some of the search heads in a cluster, could be three search heads. So depending upon how many users will be using Splunk instance for that matter. So let me clear that particular thing up. And yeah, so now we have basically looking at installing Splunk. So we are basically looking at Splunk Enterprise trial version, and all the features will be available for 60 days. So we will be looking at this in a subsequent slides. So these are certain links which I'm sharing as a part of. So you can basically download Splunk Enterprise a trial version. So just give me a second. Yeah, so I just wanted to just give me a second. So you can basically look at this particular link and you can download your Splunk Enterprise distribution. First of all, you need to log in as a Splunk user. So make sure that you are registered as an Splunk user. And the second thing I am just going to demonstrate is, so we are going to make a use of a tutorial data. And so tutorial data is basically is available in this particular link. I have basically mentioned in our slide. And so just know I will be mentioning these links in my YouTube video description box. So you may get these particular links if you are really interested in this downloadable links for the trial version, as well as if you really want to download your tutorial data, right? So you can see in the second screenshot that I will be downloading this tutorial data, and I will also be downloading this particular CSV file, and we'll be making the use of this particular data to visualize the data in our subsequent sessions, right? So just give me a second. So a little bit about Splunk licensing. I promise from the subsequent slides, everything is all about demonstration. So nothing is about the theory. So we have covered majority of the theory. So everything is practical from this particular slide. So let me clear this stuff. So you can see that there is certain information with respect to licensing. I was talking about how much amount of the data that is getting ingested per day. So that is a traditional Splunk license. Splunk also charge with respect to infrastructure and workload based licensing. And if once the license violations, if you have license violations, it could basically prevent you from searching. So this is what we are going to cover. So we are basically going to look at how to install a Splunk or launch a Splunk for that matter. We are going to ingest a tutorial data, and we will be looking at overview of the search interface. So from this particular slide onwards, everything is practical hands-on. So I will see you in the next demonstration. So stay tuned. Hello, also in this section we are going to look at installation of Splunk, and we will also be ingesting tutorial data, and hopefully it will be useful for you. So before I move on, I would request you to please bookmark these links. So one is for downloading Splunk Enterprise trial version, and the second one is how you can basically download tutorial data. We'll be playing around with this particular data, so if you are interested, and I will also be putting these links in YouTube video description box. So without any delay, let me move on. So this is the link. So if I go to the products, you can see that if I click on free trials and download, and then I will be getting two options, Splunk Cloud and Splunk Enterprise. So we are looking at Splunk Enterprise, and you can see that there are many installation packages available as per the operating system. So I basically selected Linux operating system. Now what I can do is if I really click on download now, it will basically take me to the download link, and my download will automatically get started. However, I will be basically making the use of wget as in command. So if I click here, so for example, if I close this, you can see that this is the page we have landed to. And if you click on command line wget, and I will just copy paste from here. And if I go back to my terminal, and if I try to paste this particular command, and that's it. So my Debian package installation or download has already been started and it is just now completed. If I do ls minus l, you can see that we have got this particular Debian package installed and it has got read and write permissions as of now. So what I'm going to do next is let me clear my screen, ls minus l. So I will be moving this particular Debian package to the temp directory, right? So I have also listed the procedure. So for example, I will be moving this particular package to the temp directory. Let's do that. So, so this is the package and I will be moving to the temp directory. So let's do that. And I will also navigate to the temp directory now. So now I am going to do sudo. I will say, so this is the command. You can also copy paste from here, dpkg. I would say minus I. And if I say Splunk, okay, so if I press enter, you can see that unpacking of the Splunk installation package has already been started. So this is what we intend to do. So meanwhile, it is happening. I will be doing so. We will also be configuring Splunk at the boot start, and similarly, we will also be starting the Splunk as a service. So it might take a little bit of the time, but just to avoid any kind of the delay, I will be moving on to the different instance. So here I have already installed Splunk instance, and if I go back to my home screen, you can see that I have already installed this particular Splunk. So let me log in. Meanwhile, that unpacking or installation procedure is getting completed. So this is so in the next screen, anyways, I will be getting a password. Just a second. So I've already installed a Splunk in the another Ubuntu instance. I'm basically making the use of that. So if I just enter my credentials, you can see that I have landed into my home screen. Never got it. So this is the home screen which I have gotten by default. And you can see that we are able to see search and reporting app and more on that this particular home screen in a little bit. So if I go back to my terminal and if I go back to the my current terminal, you can see that it has already been completed. So if I go back to my OneNote once again, I will just be configuring Splunk to start at the so let me copy paste this particular command. You can see that now I have got, because I have already installed Splunk, now I have got this license agreement. So of course I need to enter to the very last so that I can, press yes. So it might take a moment. So now I would like to restart my Splunk as a service. So just give me a second. So I have tried to execute once more time because I think in the previous time we have not really accepted the license and therefore we are getting certain errors. So just bear with me for a minute. Meanwhile, we scroll through this complete licensing. And once we have accepted the licensing, we will try to see how we will try to assess the features of the Splunk web in our subsequent demonstration. So it will take a minute, and sorry about that. So now I need to press yes. So you can see that now it is basically asking me to enter an administrator username. So I will say cybersecnerd, and I need to enter my password. So I have given that. So you can see that our initial script has already been configured to run at the boot time, and now I just need to start my Splunk as a service. So I will do that. So once our Splunk service has already gotten started, you can basically navigate to the Splunk in your home page, right? So it is quite easy. Only thing you should be having is your IP address of your instance, and your Splunk port should be opened at the default port, which is nothing but 8000. What I'm going to do here is I'm just trying to let you know that, for example, I'm basically making the use of this security group. You can see that I have opened this particular security group at the port number 8000, and this is my IP address which is assigned to my local host, right? So that is the only thing I should be worried about at this point in time. And the second thing is, if I copy the address from here on, and if I say this one, if I say 8000, you can see that I will be getting a home screen to log in into the Splunk for the very first time. So that's it for the installation, and in the next demonstration we will get started with the complete demonstration, complete practical, no theory at all. And I would like you to stay tuned with me for the next subsequent sessions as well. So now, since we have completed this, hello all. So in this section, we are basically looking at how to upload our tutorial data, which we have been discussing for quite a while now. So without any delay, I will be moving on to my Splunk console. So this is my console. I've successfully logged in. What I'm going to do here is, you can see this administrator tab. So before I get started, I would also like to let you know. So for example, if I go to the settings tab, you can see add data button. So I will click on the add data button. And if you can see, okay, it is basically asking me to take a tour. I will skip this option for now. So you can see that we have got following options to basically ingest data. I will be making the use of upload button. At the same time, we can also use command line utility to really monitor certain directories on my local host, and which is one of the very viable option. At the same time, if I get opportunity, I will definitely let you know. You can basically make a use of certain cool options. You need not worry about 500 MB threshold to ingest data at one point in time. If you use command line interface, that limitation does no longer exist, right? So for example, if I go back to my notebook, if you can see that you can basically make a use of the command like this to really ingest any kind of the static data, so that you need not monitor that data on the real time. And if you have any kind of the data set in your local host, you can basically ingest that data from the command line interface. More on that, probably if somebody needs help, definitely reach out, and your 500 MB limitation no longer applies. So I was telling you this, and for example, I will be selecting upload button for my current demonstration. If select file, so let me see. So I have already told you that how basically you can install or download your tutorial data. I have kept that tutorial data here. So this is the file. So these are the two files I'm going to ingest for the time being. And if I say next, you can see that host field value. So this is nothing but my current IP address. I would say automatic, and the index should be default. I can also create a new index, and I can also so for the time being, I will be selecting main, and host field value, I would be giving it as, and if I click on submit button, it may take a minute to really upload that particular data. If I click on start searching, it will take me through the landing page where it says where it will basically try to show up. So you can see that here uh, all our default events under this tutorial data has already been ingested. So only thing we should be worried about is this one at this point in time, index is equal to main. And you can see that this is the host we have configured for us. And similarly, I will also try to ingest our file. So just give me a second. If I say upload, and I will also try to upload our CSV file, which is this one. I've selected that file. If I click on next, again, I will be making it as cybersecnerd, and I will be keeping my index to default, which is main. And if I click on review and submit, so if I start searching, there will be a difference in the source at this point in time. So you can see that source is prices dot, and you can see that all the events we have already ingested at this point in time. So this is what we really want to cover, and I will see you in the next where we will try to cover search processing language. Hello all, in this section we are basically looking at search processing language, and we are going to cover the very first part, which is Splunk interface. And we will also be covering structure of SPL statement and running the basic Splunk searches in the subsequent sessions. So in the current section, we are going to basically look at how does the Splunk web look like. We will review our search application. We'll also configure search assistant, and we will try to run a search and review results. I will go back to my search. So before I get started, I just wanted to let you know. So you can see this is the Splunk bar. So if you click on apps, you can see that there are certain default applications which are already there. And in your Splunk enterprise, you might be able to see some other Splunk applications as well, which your administrator has configured as well. So these are the options available to us. So if you go to the administrator tab, you can see the account settings and the preferences. So all that you are able to see because you are an administrator and you have installed Splunk package yourself. And in the settings section, the access, it basically depends on what kind of the access you might be having. So for example, the knowledge objects, most of the people will be able to see, but all the other, like for example, system settings, data inputs, distributed environment, users and authentication. So this particular tab will be depending upon what kind of the role that has been assigned to you, power user or Splunk administrator for that matter. We have already used add data as a field where we try to ingest tutorial data into the Splunk environment, and we have successfully done that. So now what I'm going to show you next is how do you basically configure your search assistant, right? So if I go to the preferences tab, if you see here, the time zone is my default time zone. So you should be able to select your default time zone, so which will help you if you try to run any kind of the searches for that matter. So if I go to the Splunk editor, you can see themes. So you can also make changes to your theme. So for example, I can select dark theme for that matter, and I will click on apply. If I go back to the preferences once again, if I go to the SPL editor, so I have also got some other options. So for example, by default, your search assistant is full. You can also make changes with respect to the compact or full. I will go ahead with the full for the search assistant. And I would also like to see the line numbers, and therefore I will be enabling this. And search auto format, I will also be enabling this as well. And if I click on apply, it will be making certain changes. So for example, here, if I say index is equal to main, and I will say a source type is equal to vendor sales. And just remember that there is no event as of now because we are into the demo environment, and therefore I will be making it to the all time as of now. And you can see that I'm running the search in a smart mode. I will be discussing about the three modes which we might have in a little bit from now. So you can see that these are the events. These are the number of the events which is there in this particular source type. So this is one of them. So you can see all the raw data events which has been searched by this particular search job. So if I click here, you can see these are the fields which are getting extracted for our raw data. If you go to the event actions for example, if some of the people might be missing this particular thing. So if you really want to look at the source of your event, how does it look like in the original source? You can basically click on the show source. So it will basically take you back to the original source file where this particular event has already been reside. So for example, here you can see the original event in your log source file, right? So if I can go back, and apart from that, you also have other options. For example, here, if you click on the time button, you can see that we can also search event which has taken place before this event or after this time. So it is also a very good option to use. We will also be discussing about transaction command. So you can also use this particular alternative to the transaction command because we might be interested if we are really looking for certain event, what has happened before this particular event and what has taken place after this event. So that might be very, very useful at times. So apart from that, what I really want to cover here is, and there are other options as well. So for example, if you so there are other fields. So for example, if I go to the left hand side of the pane, you can see that these are the interesting fields. So for example, if I click on this event, this particular interesting field, I can also have an options for certain reports. For example, I can see the rare values, I can see the top values by time, or things of that nature, right? So for example, if I try to see top values by time, you can see that our search has already been executed and we have not really make a use of the any SPL command by ourselves, but it has also given us a very good report for that matter, right? So these are certain features which are available. At the same time, I would like to point it out because we will be making the use of time range picker all the time. So you can basically make a use of presets. Most of the people basically use a presets of last 24 hours, last 1 hour. So if you are really looking at one particular event, if you know at what point in time this particular event has happened, you can basically drill down to that particular time window. Similarly, you have also got a date and time range option, and therefore I think this is one of the suitable option if you are really looking at a certain amount of the duration in which event has taken place. Because if you are basically searching for one of the event which has taken yesterday, you need not search for last 30 days because it might take larger amount of time, right? Because Splunk has to really move a lot of data, and therefore so this is what I really want to cover in this section, and in the next section, we will be looking at search processing language. Hello all, in this section we are looking at structure of SPL query. So you can also see an example of SPL query. If I go back to the next slide, you can see that SPL query can contain key value pairs, literal strings, commands. You must have seen the commands like your stats command, your time chart command. Then you must have seen the functions like count. It is one of the basically most commonly used function under the stats command. You can also have logical operators like and, or nor, and, or, and not, and comparison operators like greater than, less than, equal to. The clauses, we can have clauses like by or as. So by clause is quite an equivalent of a group by clause in SQL, and as clause is basically used to rename certain fields. We can also have a pipe operator in the search processing language. It is one of the most commonly used. Uh, it is also most commonly used in the structure of an search processing language query. Without any delay, I will be moving on to the console. So the first thing you are able to see at this point in time is, so just give me a second. So you can see that we were talking about key value pair. So you can see index is equal to main is nothing but a key value pair. And similarly, you can also see this is again an example of the key value pair. And then we were also talking about the comparison operators. So you can see that we have used not equal to. So we are basically making the use of status is not equal to 200. So we are interested in all the events which doesn't have the error code as 200. So we are basically interested in all the events which might be giving us an error for certain reason. At the same time, time chart is an example of the command, and you can see the count is nothing but the function, right? So count is one of the function which has been defined under the time chart command, and we are basically making the use of by. So this is nothing but the clause, and category ID is nothing but the field. So we are basically trying to group by all the events with the help of one particular field, that is category ID at this point in time. So let me clear all that particular stuff. And so this is how we are able to structure this particular search processing language query. So if I go to the events, okay, I have executed this search in the fast mode. Let me execute in the verbose mode. So now if I go to the events, I should be able to see all the fields. See, since I have given status is not equal to, so let me try to see. So for example, you can see that I have gotten or I have retrieved all the events which is not equal to 200. So we have got all the events which might be giving certain kind of the error, and therefore, uh, so if I make this particular field as yes, so this particular field again, we can see this particular field has been added in a part of selected fields, and I should also be able to see this particular field in the form of the raw data, right? So this is what I really wanted to cover. In the next section, we'll be covering much more details. Hello all, in this section we are basically going to run some of the basic searches, and you can see that we are going to generate some of the reports for this example. We will start with the first report. The first report says generate a report of number of events grouped by category ID. So first of all, I would like to, so for example, R is index is equal to main. So first thing is, the very first important thing is you should be familiarizing yourself with respect to the source type. So if I say stats count by source type, and of course I am using the demo data, and therefore for me, I have selected the all time in the time range picker. So it is basically giving me what kind of the source type that do exist at this point in time. So I have copied this particular source type so that I remember that. You can see that these are the two source types I have copied. So now the second thing I really want to do is, so for example, I also want to acquaint myself with kind of the fields which might be existing in one of these source types. If I say vendor sales, if I vendor sales, okay, source. So you can see that I'm now able to see what are the fields that might be existing in this particular source type of data, right? So I also want to make myself familiar what is the source type and what are the fields that might be existing in this particular data. So I should know that where to look for which particular field. So you can see that this is the account ID is one of the field, code is one of the field. So there are certain fields which might be there in one particular data source. So now I will go back to my question. It says generate a report of number of events grouped by the category ID. So I can see at this point in time the category ID is not the field which is existing in this particular data type. So let me try with the second source type. So just give me a second. So if I will make a use of this particular source type, what shall I be getting? So you can see that here I will be getting this particular field. So now at least I know that I should be looking for this kind of the data in this particular source type, which is nothing but access combined W cookie. So now what I am saying in the report, in our report is generate a report of number of events grouped by the category ID. So I just need to do this. I will be making the use of stats as a command. I will say stats count by category ID. So you should be making the use of category ID as a field, and it should be, if I try to run this particular search, you can see that I am able to get the result back, and this is what we have asked in our first search. So I can also go to the visualization tab. You can see that this is a visualization tab. And if I try to change this particular chart to the pie chart, I think this will be much more valuable in terms of the numbers, right? I can also format this number, what should be displayed here. So for example, if I say pie chart format, okay, so I will be moving on to the next query. So for example, generate a report of top 10 vendor IDs for vendor codes D or E. Again, I need to find out vendor ID is one of the field which might be existing in which particular data, right? So for example, if I let me try to again run this particular search, and I will be looking for the events. So I know that vendor ID is not one of the field which might be existing in our current data source. So let's change that source type to again vendor sales. So yes, I have gotten this particular field vendor ID. Now I will go back to the basic searches once again. So you can see that generate a report of top 10 vendor IDs for vendor codes D and E. How will I do that? So for example, I will be making the use of this particular field. So let me copy this particular field vendor ID, and I will say vendor ID is equal to. So this is and I have also got one more field which is nothing but the code. So what it says is I am only interested for when codes D and E, right? So what I can do here is code, I will say, is equal to D, or I would say code is equal to E, right? So this is how I am grouping. So if I try to execute this particular search, and if I go back to the code once again, you can see that I have got all the events corresponding to these particular codes itself. Now it is basically asking me top vendors, right? So I will say top vendor ID. If I click on, if I try to run this search, you can see that I have gotten the result back. So top is also one of the command in your search processing language. So by default, it will be basically showing me 10 results. It will be showing me top 10 results, and I can also limit the result if I say limit is equal to 5. So it will be basically giving me top 5 results. And at the same time, if I do not really want it to show percentage a column, what I can do is show pers is equal to false. So you can see that now I'm not able to see the percentage as a column. So let me go back again to our running basic searches slide. Now the third report which we are interested in is retrieve all the events where account ID starts with 6. So first of all, I need to ascertain or determine in which particular source type this particular field is existing, right? So if I click here, let's see whether this particular field exists in the same source type of the data or not. So this is the field which I am interested in. So if I copy this particular field, and if I say I am only interested in account ID that starts with 6, if I put star, it will basically give me all the results, all the account IDs that basically start with 6. So one more thing I really want to mention here, if you are basically mentioning your wildcard and then you are basically mentioning 5, it is not the very effective way of searching in Splunk, because it might affect the performance of the Splunk. So it is not recommended. Rather, you can basically make a use of rex command, which I will be talking about in the subsequent sessions. So let's 6 star. So it has basically given me all the results which has got account ID starting with the 6. So moving on, now I am interested in retrieving all the events where response size is more than 3500 bytes. So I'm looking at bytes, 3500 bytes. So I wanted to make sure, do we really have any kind of the predetermined field which basically shows me byte? So let's say access combined. So this is my data source. If I try to run this particular search, you can see that I'm getting bytes is one of the predetermined field in this particular source type. So if I say here bytes is greater than 3500, I think I will be able to get the results what I am really looking at. So if I go to the bytes once again, you can see that all the events which has got or which has got the response time or which has got the response size greater than that of 3500 bytes are already included here. And now I need to calculate the biggest response size. I should be able to do that. So for example, if I eliminate this and if I try to pipe this, and I will be using stats as a command, and I will say stats max and bytes. So let's see whether it is giving us the intended result or not. So you can see the event or the response with the biggest response with the biggest size is nothing but the 4000 bytes. Similarly, I can also use minimum as a function, bytes. Similarly, I can also use median as a function. I would say median, bytes. And if I go to the last report that basically asks us, can you please let us know what is the biggest response size, what is the smallest response size, what is the median response size, and total number of requests. So what I can do here is I can say count. So this is what we are really looking at. You can see the maximum response size is 400 bytes, the minimum response size is 200 bytes, the median size is nothing but 200 bytes, and these are number of the requests. So 39,000 is the number of the total request. So I can also make a use of as a clause. So let's say I would say biggest response, and I would say minimum bytes as, and I can also say count as total number of requests, total number of request. So if I click execute this particular search, I'm basically trying to make a use of as a clause. You can see that my table is now tabulated with the with the name which I was intending to use, right? Total number of requests, smallest response, and biggest response. So this is what I wanted to cover. I will see you in the next. Hi all. So in this section, we are going to cover stats as a command. Moving on to the next slide. So stats command is also categorized under the category of transforming commands for the simple reason this family of commands that convert search results into data tables. So other commands that can be categorized under stats command, as you can see in the slide, stats, chart, time chart, top, and rare. And you can also see stats command, and we have also used stats command in our previous demonstration, and we have basically used with count as a mathematical function. So count is one of the mathematical function that is most commonly used alongside with the stats command. There are I've tried to list some of the mathematical functions that are mostly used along with the stats command. So the first demo, so before I move on to the eval stats command with eval demo, I will be showing you the demo of the main stats function command. So for example, let me clear my screen. Let's say I am only interested in status is equal to 500 or not equal to 200 for that matter. So for example, how can I use my stats function? Stats count by status. So you can see that we have successfully used stats command, and we have basically retrieved the result. One more function I would like to use is so that you will be able to see how we can basically use mathematical function alongside with the stats command. So I would say stats, I would say max here bytes. I can also use as clause. So for example, let's say biggest response like this, and I can similarly use minimal function bytes, and I would say as smallest response. Similarly, I will also try to make a use of count as a function, and I would say count as total number of requests. I would say total number of request. Okay. So this is how we are basically making the use of stats command along with some of the mathematical functions that are most commonly used. So now coming back to the slide, now I am going to take you through the demonstration of a stats command with the eval demo. So what I'm going to do next here is, so let's use stats command. I would say stats. Again, I would say count. I would say eval. I would say we are only interested in, let's say, server error. So I would say status is equal to 500. And I would say, let's categorize this particular field as server errors. Okay, server not available. So if I try to execute this particular search, I am seeing certain error. It says stats count eval. Okay. Is equal to 500, and yeah, so I have missed the as clause, so probably now it should be working as intended. So you can see that we have gotten the result back. So it is of prime most importance to note, you must rename the aggregation using the as clause when you are basically using stats command with eval as a function. As you can see that when we are using eval along with stats, you can basically use as a clause to rename this particular field. Okay. I will be moving on to the next demonstration where I will be demonstrating about field summary as a command. So what I can do next here is I will simply be replacing with the field summary. I would say field, I would say summary, field summary. So what happens is whatever the functions or mathematical functions that are there under the stats command, you can see the output of all those mathematical functions. For example, count, distinct count, maximum, minimum, and everything for that matter. And similarly, it is not very readable at this point in time. You can see that there are so many values which are getting listed in a tabulated manner. Therefore, we can also use maximum vals is equal to 5 so that our values will be restricted to the count of 5. So now it has become little more readable. So now I will be moving on to the next demo. So now we will be taking a look at event stats as a command. So when you say event stats as a command, just remember it is synonymous with the baselining. When I say baselining, I will explain you in a brief, in a bit, what it means. So event stat command calculates the aggregation and adds it to the every event in the result. So it basically performs aggregation and it also adds alongside with every event in the result. How we can basically make a use of event stats as a command? Let's try to see that. So now what I'm going to do next is, so event stats command, let's try to make a use of event stats as a command. I would say time chart. I would say time chart, and now I will say span is equal to, let's say, 1 hour. I will say average, I am interested in, let's say, average bytes, and I will be making response. I will be saying response size. Okay. And now what I'm going to do next is I will also be making the use of event stats as a command. So now event stats, I would say again, I would say average, and now I will be making the use of response. So if I try to execute this particular search in a moment, we will be having a result. What happens is, uh, in the slide we were seeing that it basically performs aggregation and adds it to the every event against that. So we have basically performing what kind of the response size, what is the average response size of the request we are getting in an hour duration. So that's what we did with the help of the time chart. And then we are trying to baseline uh, this each and every response against the average baseline. So what I say, I think it will become more clear when I go to the visualization tab. Now you can see that, this is the baseline. This is the baseline which we have gotten with the help of the event stats as a command. Now for each and every event we should be able to see whether the average response size of that particular event is more than that of the baseline or below that of the baseline. So this is how it is adding value to the time chart command, right? So again, I will go back to the basic definition. It basically performs aggregation and adds it to the every event in the result. And therefore, I think we are getting a very, I would say we are extracting some value out of our result, and when we really go to the visualization, it is basically helping us. Okay, so moving on to the next demo, streamstats command. So it also performs aggregation as the event is seen in a running manner. Now, what does it mean? So as and when Splunk indexes data, or as and when we have gotten a result for our search or Splunk search, it is trying to perform an aggregation, right? So I will try to explain more when I go to the demo. So let me go back to the demo. So what I do here is, let me basically make a use of internal command. So what I'm trying to see is, I'm basically making the use of internal as an index, and I'm basically searching for events which is warning or error specifically, right? So stats, let me try to do like this. I think it will become a little more readable. Just give me a second. So what I'm trying to say is, in the internal index, I'm trying to look for the events warning and error, and I'm basically trying to count by the components. And then I'm trying to make a use of I'm trying to sort that particular count. So let me perform that result. I think it will be much more easily, so let me just give me a second. So if I try to eliminate this, so now you can see that stats count by component, and I'm also sorting the count. So therefore I can see that, when the count is only one against the component, we are able to see those particular results sorted, and I can also do sort minus count for that matter. So the results will be stored in a descending manner. You can see this, right? Now, if I try to make a little bit of changes, now what can I see here? So just give me a second. If I say like this sort count, and I will be getting the results like this. So can you see here, it is basically performing an aggregation. It is basically performing an addition, as in when it basically seeing events from my Splunk search. And therefore you can see these particular results are getting added in each result, right? So if I go beyond, you can also see that these are the total number of the results. So this is how we basically make a use of stream stats as a command. And I'm also saying stream stats command is quite synonymous with ranking also. When I say ranking, let's try to understand what does I mean. What do I mean? So for example, let's say main, again, the source type I will be using is this one. And if I say action, I'm only interested in the action which corresponds to the purchase. And so what I'm going to do here is, action is equal to purchase. I would say stats, I would say count, I would say by item ID, and count here I will say as let's say total purchase. Right, total purchase. And now what I'm going to do here is sort. I would say minus total purchase. So if just a second, I'm trying to explain what I'm trying to do. So I'm basically counting the total number of purchase for every item, and I'm trying to sort by the total purchase. So if I try to run this particular command, let me try to see what is the result we are getting. Can you see here, we are basically getting the result. So we can see that for this particular item ID, we have seen the maximum number of the purchases. So if I try to make the use of streamstats as a command, and I would say sum count, so let me see what is the result we are getting here. I am trying to do something different here. Let's see. I am only interested in the top five results, and I am deleting this particular statement for the time being. You can see that I have got the count against all the item IDs and what is the total number of the purchases. We have already gotten that. Now I am trying to basically make a use of streamstats as a command as rank. If I would say, it should be basically be giving the result what I am interested in. So as I am saying that, streamstats command is also performing aggregation, but at the same time it is also performing aggregation in a running manner. So you can see that for the count of the purchases is most, we have the rank corresponding to that as number one. So this is what we intend to cover in this particular demonstration, and I will see you for the eval set of the commands. Hello all. So in this video, we are basically looking at eval command, and I'm going to demonstrate four use cases for the eval command. So let us get started without any delay. The very first command, we are basically going to create a one more field with the help of the eval as a command. Okay. So I will move back to my console. So before I do that, I just wanted to run a basic search. And I just wanted to give you a glimpse that there is a field known as bytes, but there is no field which says k bytes or kilobytes. Okay. So if I try to run, let's say, and I will be making the use of this command. So what it does is, if you can see that if I execute this function, it has basically created one more field which says kilobytes. Okay. So now what I'm going to do is, now I'm going to make a use of this particular field, and I say stats. I'm also using stats as a function, and I say maximum kilobytes as a biggest request by item ID. Now I also want to round off whatever values which are there in this particular field which says k bytes. So it will basically round off to the closest decimals. For example, 3.86 will be getting rounded off to 4. Okay. If I do that, I will be getting the intended result. And you can see that our request has our bytes has already been rounded off to the closest decimal places, or closest whole numbers. So let me move back to our slides, and I will be moving on to the second use case, which says conditional functions. So in this particular case, I am going to demonstrate something. So let's do it. So what I'm going to do it here is, so let me go back to your so this is our source type. So this time I'm going to make a use of, if a conditional statement as well. So for example, if this particular log contains failed password in the raw data, basically we will going to categorize that particular data as in failure or something else. So let's say eval. Now eval, I would say category, or let me say eval result is equal to, and I will say if like, and I will say, so I'm looking at the raw field, raw data. So for example, if that raw data contains field password, field, so if it contains field password, so I'm going to, I will say field, and if it doesn't contain, so I will say success. Okay. So this is what I'm going to do, and here also should be there in the double quotes. And let me see whether I will be getting one more field generated by this or not. If I go here, you can see that results are generated. You can see that 82% of the results are failed and the rest of the results are success. So now I have created one more field using eval as a command. I can basically use stats command, and I can be able to group by this result field. So if I do that, I will be getting the result as intended. So you can see that these many requests we have got, or we have come across failed responses, and here we have got certain requests where we have got successful connections. Okay. So this is also one of the use case in terms of conditional functions. So let me move to the okay. Okay, so now I will be demonstrating the third use case with the help of a case, right? So it is pretty much same as that the case switch case we basically studied in C or C++ language. So let's try to do about it. So I will say access combine. Again, I will be making the use of different source type, and I will say eval, I will say category, I will say case, and in case statement, what I'm going to do here is if I say status, so let's say status is greater than equal to 500. So I would say it is server error. And if I say status is greater than equal to 400, I would say client error. And if I say status is equal to 200, I would say it is okay. And for all the remaining cases, 1 equal to 1, I would say it is not applicable. Okay. So this is the case statement. So it is going to create a one more category. So if I run this particular search, you should be able to see category. Category, you can see that we have got client error, we have got server error, we have got OK as well in the top interesting fields. So now what I can do, I can again run the similar command. I will say stats count by category, and I will be able to get the result, which basically shows how many successful connections are there, how many server errors, how many client error. So again, this is also one of the use case for eval command. And now I will be moving forward. So this is the last use case with respect to the eval command, and we are looking at string concatenation. Okay. So what I'm going to do here is let me rub this off, and if I click on this, so what I'm going to do here is I will be making the use of category ID. Yeah, I think so let's make a use of category ID. You can see the category ID. At the same time, let's also make the use of item ID. So I am going to basically combine item ID as well as category ID. So let's try to do that. So what I'm going to do here is I will say eval. I will say uh, category come item ID, and I will say category ID dot and slash. So I'm just including backslash in the double or forward slash in the double quotes because I also want this category come item ID to be represented in a some manner or some fashion, right? So I will let you know what once. So I will say item ID, and if I do that, probably there will be one more field which should be getting created. Yeah, I forgot the dot operator here, and therefore, so if I see here, you can see that I have got one more field created strategy. So this is category come dot item ID. So now I can again be able to use stats count by, I would say, category. So if I say I will be able to use a stats function with respect to this as well, which you can see it here as of now. Okay. So this is what I really wanted to cover in this particular session, and the next, I will see you in the next. Hello all. In this section, we are going to talk about time chart command, and so time is always plotted in x-axis versus one particular field when we are talking about time chart command. So it is usually good to measure over time period. So it basically gives a measurement over certain time duration, and it basically accepts only one split by clause. Okay, so example could be average response time over past 7 days, and so if we can also specify time span, which might be one of the arguments for this particular command, and if we do not specify anything explicitly, it will be by default. So if you do not you make a use of the time span as an argument or parameter, so this is how the default values will be taken care of. So for example, if in the time range picker, if you mention last 24 hours, by default it will take the time span of 30 minutes. Time chart command. So of course you can also use in conjunction with the time wrap command, and I will try to show if it is possible with the current data set. Okay, so let me move on to my console. So what I'm trying to show here. So before I move on, I really want to show you something. Just give me a second. So what I really want to show you before time chart, I just wanted to demonstrate a difference between, I would say, stats, I would say count, by, I would say, action status. I would like to demonstrate a difference between a stats and a chart command. So you can see this is a visualization. If I try to do with the help of these particular charts, you can see that this is how it is. So this is the action, and I am able to see the corresponding status 400, 403 for the same action itself, you know. So when I go to the visualization, it is not very, very clear, and it is very, very messy, I would say. So if I try to replace by, let's say, chart, sometimes your chart command is extremely useful in terms of, you know, in terms of drawing visualizations. So for example, if I really make it little large, you can see that the success rate for every action is very, very great as compared to other errors, right? Which should be and it is basically normal behavior. And you can see that, you know, while making the use of the chart command, our visualization has become a lot more clear, and it is really adding value to what we really want to visualize. So this is what I really want to show, and just give me a second. So now I will be moving to the time chart as a command. So let me try to make a use of a different source type. I would say this one, and I would say a time chart. I would say count, and I will not be making the use of any of the parameters at this point in time. If I go to the visualization and I will just make it a normal chart, so you can see that I have not really specified any time span, but you can see that it has taken a time span of 24 hours by default, right? So this is what I really wanted to show. Now the second thing I really wanted to do here is I will again go back to my this source type. I will only be interested in action purchase for the time being. And what I can do here is time chart count, and span is equal to, let's say, 1 hour. Okay, and okay, time chart count 1 hour by, I would say, category ID. Yeah, so I think we have got the visualization by the category ID, and but the visualization is again very, very messy. Or in terms of the column chart, probably, you know, we would like to go ahead with the line chart. So this is, if you can see that now the visualization is quite clear, again because of so many categories. Again, we are not really able to see the charts in a very, very clear format, but the line charts are always best way to visualize when you are making the use of time chart as a command. I can show you time wrap also, but it is not very, very useful. But let me try to demonstrate that as well, how you can make a use of time wrap command as well. Uh, However, it might not be that useful, but anyways, I will be making the use of that. I'm talking about current data sets. I do not really have the data set to bring much more meaningful value with respect to the time wrap command. For that reason, I was saying. So, and I'm only interested in internal, and I would say log level is equal to, and I would say, let's say log level is equal to warning, and I would say time chart. I would say count, time chart count, and I would say span is equal to, let's say, uh, I would say 1 hour, right? So you can see that this is the time chart with respect to the warning, and there is little bit of so if you go to the statistics, this is how it fluctuates. And so for example, if I really make so for example, if I make a use of like this, and if I say by component, let me see what is the result I am getting here. So you can see by the various components, this is time chart count span is equal to 1 hour by component, right? So this is how you are able to visualize. Probably I would also want to use a time wrap. I would say time wrap 1 hour. And okay, so here I will be making 10 minutes. However, because I have done my Splunk installation today itself, this particular command will not be very, very useful. Normally, what I would rather do is I will keep the span as in 1 hour, span as in 1 hour, and time wrap is equal to 1D. A time wrap should be equal to, so for example, just give me a second, what I'm trying to say here is if you really want to derive a meaningful value with respect to this particular command, what you can do here is, but I have done the installation today itself, therefore will not be able to make the comparison for different weekdays. So what I can do here is I will say span is equal to 1 day, span is equal to 1 hour, and here I will be keeping it as 1D. But however, I do not have the logs, therefore, this particular command will not be very, very useful for that matter. So you can see that here I'm not really getting a very useful value at this point in time, and here I can also, by component, this is not very, very meaningful if you are really looking at time wrap as a command. So what I'm trying to say here is, if I really want to demonstrate something, I will be making it as 10 minutes, and time wrap is equal to 1 hour, I would say, just because I do not have a data with respect to. So for example, now you can basically draw a comparison. If I had done the installation, let's say 7 days before, I will be able to compare the logs or event to respect to the days. What are the events I am able to see on Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. So for that kind of the comparison, the time wrap command is very, very useful. So in that particular case, you can specify the span of 1 hour and time wrap is equal to 1 day, and you will be able to come up with extremely good visualization for that matter. This particular graph I have just demonstrated just to take an example, but this is not very, very meaningful at this point in time. Okay, so that's it for this demonstration. I will see you in the next. Hello all. So now we have come to the lesson number 4, and we will be looking on fields and fields extraction. So this is the agenda. We will be looking at what does field mean, and field extraction wizard, and using rex command. So we are going to explore how we can basically perform field extraction. So we can also use a field extraction wizard, and we can also be able to use the rex command. So what are fields basically? Fields are nothing but searchable key value pairs and essential for tailoring searches. Can be created during the index time and search time. By default, it is a search time. Search time is recommended. Whatever the fields we are going to extract in a subsequent session or subsequently, we are basically going to make a use of search time field extraction. Just know Splunk automatically extracts some of the default fields. Moving on, so these are certain default fields. So as we said before, the default fields are created by Splunk automatically. And you can also see some of the internal fields. So for example, underscore raw underscore time. So we have already seen how to basically make a use of underscore raw underscore time. Some of the basic default fields: host, source type, index, Splunk server. So these are also the example of the basic default fields. At the same time, you are also seeing in the second screenshot, there are certain default date time fields as well, right? So using date time fields, I'm just giving an example of this particular search. So I will be taking you there in a minute. So just give me a second. So if I go to my Splunk search, you can see that I have again basically made a use of same source type. You can see that I'm filtering with the action is equal to purchase, and I've successfully used this date time fields if you see. I've also grouped by date R, and then I try to rename this particular fields as well. So basically, I just wanted to give you an example of that. Okay. Now the second thing is, I think now we have successfully seen this example. I will be moving on. So here we come in the field extraction, which is the important from this particular lesson. So you can see that we are going to look at the field extractor wizard. We will also be looking at the rex command. So now we are in the demo. So without any delay, I will be moving on to my Splunk console. So thank you for that. So now I'm going to be basically making the use of, I will be using this particular source type. So if I execute this particular search, you can see all the events corresponding to this search. So for example, now I need to basically look at, so of course it is very, very important. If you really want to extract some of the fields, you should be familiar with the kind of the raw data which might be present in certain source type or your data source. So for example, here, if for so for example, in the failed password, so I also say I'm only interested in failed password related logs. So hopefully yes. So I have gotten that. So for example, failed password for invalid user. So you can see that this is the name of the user app server. Okay. And similarly, if I scroll down, you should be able to see test user. And similarly, if I'll scroll down, this is you can again be able to see MongoDB as well. So here, if I go to the interesting fields, you can see that there is no username present. So this particular fields are not getting extracted automatically. So how we can basically extract this particular field, which will be able to give us some kind of the meaningful information while we are trying to do the search. So there are two ways of basically utilizing your field extraction wizard. You can see that on the left hand side, just below the interesting fields, you can click on this extract new fields, or you can also click on one of the events. If you click on one of the events, you go to the event actions and you can basically click on extract fields. So both will basically land you to the field extraction wizard. I will be using the former method. I will be clicking on extracting new fields. Okay. So here I am. So now I need to basically select one of the sample logs. So I will rather be going ahead with one of the logs which might be useful for me. So I'm seeing app server test user. So let's click on MongoDB. So I have selected the sample log. So now last 90 days, select a sample log. I will click on next. So now it is basically asking me whether I really want to use a regular expression or delimiters. So this particular raw logs are not really present in a CSV file. So we need to anyways go ahead with the regular expression, and this is also one of the efficient methods. I will click on next after selecting the regular expression methods. So now it is basically asking me to select one of the field which we really want to extract. So I will just select this particular field and I will give this particular field name as, let's say, username, add extraction. So if I click on show regular expression, it will basically show me, so this is the regular expression which is getting generated automatically by the Splunk. Though it is not very, very efficient, you can also edit the regular expression if you really want to, but but not needed at this point in time. Okay. So if I click on next, if I click on next, you can also see validate, right? So if I click on next, I'm also able to see if I can be able to eliminate some of the incorrect fields as well. So in the very first log, you can see that app server is there. Similarly, you can so for example, you can see the test user here. You can also see the MongoDB as well. So in some of the fields, you can see that in some of the fields you can see that uh, your username is not basically present, right? So at this point in time, in my method, you can see that all the usernames are getting extracted, so which is correct at this point in time. Or if you really want that your regular expression is basically selecting some of the fields which it should not be selecting, you can just click on this cross button. So it will basically be eliminating some of the fields which it might be extracting as of now. So I will because my regular expression is extracting the data which I am expecting. So I will not be making any changes, though you have an option. So that this looks good to me. I will go to next. So now it is basically asking me that this particular field extraction is one of the example of the knowledge object. So I can be the owner. I should be able to share with my search and reporting application. I should be able to share this particular knowledge objects with all the apps. So by default, I will just, I will keep it as default, but though you have an option because I'm an administrator, I can also select app or all apps, but not required at this point in time. So I will click on finish now. You can see that it has already been successful. If I click explore the fields which I have just created, it will take a moment. So if I go to the all time, so here you can see that in the username field, it is basically giving me extracting all the username. So we have successfully done the field extraction using the field extraction wizard. I will see you in the next. Hello all. In this section, we are going to cover the rex command demonstration. So a rex command basically enables you to make a use of regular expression, and just remember that fields extracted are not persisted. So this is an example of we are basically trying to extract an IP address from the raw data, and how to do that. I will show you when I move back to my console. So you can see that if I go to the events, if I try to see the raw events, you can see that from is a word which is preceded by the IP address, and similarly in this particular raw data as well, right? So I really want to capture this IP address. So what I'm doing here is, so for this is the rex command. So I'm saying after we have found this particular word from, and the next subsequent word I would like to capture under this particular field IP address. So this is nothing but I'm just trying to initiate a group capture. If you might be knowing from the regular expressions, this is how we initiate a group capture. And then D specifies digit, so backslash to escape the digit, and then digit can constitute one digit and can also constitute two digit, can also constitute three digit at most. And similarly, then I'm trying to escape the dot as a character, special character, and then again, so this basically constitutes and is trying to give me the IP address. So if I go to the statistics, you can see that I'm able to find all the IP addresses, right? So what I can do here is if I'm only I only want to execute a search for the events which basically has got IP address as a field or IP address data, right? So what I can do here is IP address is equal to star. So this will basically eliminate all the events which doesn't have IP address as a field, okay? So you can see that now I am able to see the IP addresses as well, okay? So now what I would like to show you is, since we are able to extract the field now, so I would like to make a small changes with respect to this particular regex. What I can do here is, so I am forming a character class and I am saying non-space characters, and then I say plus plus, right? So this also should be giving me the intended field as well, and I will be closing the brackets. Let me see whether I am getting the intended result or not. So if I go to the, yeah, so what I can do here is table IP address. So it will basically show me whether I am getting the results or not. Yes, I am getting the results. So now what I can do here is I can basically, so if I say so, so you can see that, okay, so now since I have the IP address, what I can do is I can use IP location as a command, and I will say IP address. So if I do that, I will be getting some other default fields getting created. So for example, city, country, and there might be others, like for example, region, right? So now what I can do is I can basically look at stats, count by. country for that matter, right? So if I say so, I will be getting a results. So the failed password attempts I'm able to see from Argentina, Australia, and I can also be able to draw a visualization. So I think the pie chart will be more appropriate. So for example, you can see that the password login attempts or failure attempts are coming from all these countries, and you should be able to see the maximum attempts are coming from United States and United Kingdom basically, and also from China. Okay, so and I can also make a use of geostats as a command. Geostats count by. So if I go to the statistics visualization, okay. So I'm just trying to demonstrate an example how you can basically extract a field and you can also use these particular fields as well, you know. So I will keep it like that only, and I can also use a time chart as a command, a time chart count by country for that matter. So I think yes. So this is how I'm trying to categorize. I'm trying to make a use of time chart as a command, and of course for this, probably the line chart is most most valuable asset as of now. So so this is what I really want to show you in this particular demonstration, right? So we have effectively made a use of rex command, and I will be seeing you in the next. Hello, also we are at lesson number 5. We are basically going to cover grouping events and using lookups. So we are going to cover transaction command, join and append and lookups. In the current section, we are going to cover transaction command, and these are some of the information that is made available with respect to transaction command. Specifically used for forming correlation searches when the data is spread across indexes, source types, or host. And we also see that there are certain other fields which will be getting generated as a part of this particular command, and just know that events are chronologically ordered, so I will show you there, and we can also make a use of the constraints, and I will take you through the demonstration how to use constraints as well. So without a further ado, I will be jumping onto my console. So I'm basically making the use of this particular command and transaction and JSession ID. This is one of the field basically which has got an identifier with respect to the one of the session which is ongoing, right? Or the session which might have been terminated or which might have been completed. So this is an identifier corresponding to the sessions, right? So when I try to make a use of this particular command now, what you can see that there are basically three events and we have grouped these particular three events in one particular transaction. And in the timestamp, you can see the timestamp. So for example, here for the first event, you can see 8:03 36 seconds and 8:03 39 seconds, 8:03 38 seconds. So your transaction basically picks up the timestamp which is corresponding to the very first event in your transaction. So this you just need to remember this. And now I what I can do is let me try to correlate searches with the help of that multi fields. Okay, so I'm using a session ID. I'm also using a client IP address. So when we basically use transaction command, one more thing you need to be wary of. You might take a cognizance of that, you know, there is a one more field which has been created. The field name is duration. So this particular field also gives us a visibility. One particular session will be prolonged or will stay for how many seconds or how many minutes for that matter, right? So this is also one of the field which might be, and you can see there is one more field which has gotten generated as a part of transaction command, and you can see that event count is also there. Okay. So these are the two things, and apart from that, so you can now use transaction command with other commands. So for example, if I say, let me try to make a use of stats. If I'm interested in, like, you know, what is the session ID that is the longest session, let's say what is the biggest session so far, so I can use max. I can see duration, duration, and I would say as Okay, so if I try to search this, okay, I'm basically, so now I should be getting certain result. So let me see whether I am getting result or not. So you can see that our biggest session, which stays or which has uh, it has gotten of it is of 15 seconds, right? So this is one of the biggest session, right? And similarly, you can also make a use of time chart command for that matter. Time chart, I would say time chart, I would say count, I would say just give me a second. I would say span, I will say let's say 1 hour. Okay, and I would also say count, and I would say by duration, right? If I say so, let me see whether we are getting a result or not. So this is how you can basically make a use of transaction command. And if you go to the visualization, let's see whether we are getting something or not. So definitely we are able to see, and if I also make a little bit of the changes, if I keep it default, let's say now what we are getting here is. So, yeah, I think this is much more useful. I think we have really bracketed into the or bucketed into a very small duration. You can also see the session, what is the biggest session and how, so we can see the duration of the session IDs over the period of time using a time chart command. So this is also how you can utilize a transaction command as well. So I would like to give you one more example. So just give me a second. So if I say starts with, I would say action is equal to I would say view, and I would say ends with. So I'm also making the use of the constraints here. I would say purchase. So we are only interested at this point in time. I am eliminating this. So we are only interested in the events which basically represents the purchase, right? So for example, the events which represent the purchase, right? The end result is a purchase of that particular item. So we can also make use of the constraints here. So this is how we are basically making the use of transaction as a command. And you can also see there is one more field. So you can see that a close txn. So if the value of this particular field corresponds to 0, so it also represents the incomplete sessions, right? Incomplete sessions as well. So just remember this particular thing as well, because it might come a little handy in some of the use cases as well. So this is what I really wanted to cover. Hello all, in this section we are going to cover subsearch, append and join. And as you can see, there are certain details I have mentioned in this slide with respect to the subsearch. So Splunk enables using subsearches, and the main intention to of the subsearch is to generate arguments for the main search. So this is the example. I'm going to formulate a report on the item IDs for top product IDs. Subsearch is definitely coming to the rescue because we are really looking at product IDs, and top product IDs will be ever changing, right? It is going to change in certain time duration, right? So that is why it is helping even more. Without any delay, I will be moving on to the console. What I'm going to do here is I would say search. Again, a source type should be equal to, I would say again, this is the source type. Now I am basically looking at top three product IDs, sorry about that, product IDs, and I am only interested in the fields product ID. So this is the from the sub search I'm trying to generate an argument for my main search, and in this particular sub search we are basically returning product ID as an argument. Okay, so now I will go back to my main search. I would say stats, I would say count, I would say values, because I am looking at item ID for the top product IDs. So I think it will become much more clear I think just a second, product, and I would say ID. If I execute this particular search, it is going to give me the results. What happens is this particular sub search is basically returning me an argument which is nothing but the product ID. So by using or by leveraging the sub search, I will always have the top product IDs for which I am looking, and for the top product IDs, we are basically trying to report item IDs, right? So you can see that these are the top three product IDs for which we have got the result for the uh, under categorized item ID. So this is what I really want to cover. And now in the next slide, I will also be telling about join, but unfortunately for the join, I do not have the sufficient data, or probably I do not have a field which is quite common in the tutorial data sets. So I will not be making demonstrating the use case for that. So coming to the next, I will be demonstrating three use cases for the append as a command as well. But when I say append, these are the 2 points will be giving you sufficient information. It basically appends the result of subsearch to the main search. And the second thing is commonly used to combine the results of two dissimilar searches. And always remember, when we are trying to compare two dissimilar searches using two different time frames, it will come to rescue. So now I'm coming to the demonstration. So just give me a second. So if I go back to my next slide, so this is what I really want to demonstrate for the append command. I will take you through how does it look like. For example, I'm basically looking at this particular data source. I'm filtering by the action purchase. I'm also making the use of the category, which is nothing but the arcade. And you can also see that I'm basically trying to give one particular value, and I'm trying to tag it as yesterday sales. So I will give you a little bit more information about that. If I go here, what I can do here is, so for example, again, if I look for the same category or action, let's say action is equal to purchase, and I would also say category is equal to arcade. And if I hopefully it will basically give me the result if I do not do any kind of the typo. Yes, I did. For example, if I go back to my query, if I copy paste from here, category ID, not category. So just give me a second. So I will place it. So what I'm trying to show here is if I try to make a use of time chart as a command, time chart, and I would say span is equal to D, and I would say count, then I would say by category ID. If I try to execute this particular search, you can see that this is the number of the purchases we have come across for this particular category ID arcade on a given number of the day. So I'm basically looking at the sale or the purchase, the number of the purchases that is being made on 8th of September 2022. So what I'm going to do here is I'm basically tagging all the purchases on the 8th of September as yesterday's sales. And similarly, what I'm trying to do here is in my sub search, I'm basically looking at all time search, and therefore I mentioned earliest is equal to 1. So what I'm going to do here is I will just make append. So I'm basically demonstrating append as of now. So I will be executing this particular search. So you can see that I have got the result for two dissimilar searches across two different time frames. You can see the yesterday's sales versus all time sales. And similarly, what happens is, I will also be demonstrating about append columns. So if I do that, always remember append columns basically merge the results. It basically, so I would suggest, so at this point, it is basically merging the result what we have at this point in time. So if I execute this particular search, you can see that we are able to see yesterday's sales versus all-time sales. If I go to the visualization, it is not very clear at this point in time. But if I try to make a little bit of changes, let's say transpose, so you can see that now the visualization is quite clear. Yesterday's sales is 72 and all-time sales is 537. So this is what I really want to demonstrate. Now I will be covering the append pipe as well. So I will be moving on to the different tab. So this is an example. Just give me a second. So what we are going to do in the append pipe demonstration is, so when we say append pipe, always remember we are basically talking about the totals, subtotals and totals, right? So what I'm going to do here is, so we are basically returning a result. We are basically returning a result for top three item IDs by product IDs, right? So this already we have. And what we are going to do here is I am just making the use of show percentage is equal to false because I don't need that particular column anyways. And now what I'm going to do here is I am saying append. So when we are talking about subtotals and totals, we are basically looking at append pipe, okay? And now I will be making the use of subsearch. I would say stats, I would say sum, I would say count, and I would say by product ID. So that is fine. And I'm going to make a little bit of the changes. Eval item, sorry about that, item ID is equal to, I would say total of space and dot product ID. So hopefully this should be giving me the result. So if I make a use of the append pipe command, so now no, we haven't really got the result. So one more thing I forgot, product ID. So now you can see that, so when we are talking about append pipe as a command, it always represents subtotals or totals. So you can see that I have got the subtotal of this particular product ID. So total of this particular product ID is nothing but 234. So when you think about append pipe, you always think about subtotals and totals just beside that or just below that. Okay. So this is what I really wanted to. Hello all, in this section we are going to cover lookups demonstration. So just a few words about lookups. So it basically enables you to use external data into Splunk that is not indexed. It basically enhances search results with your useful data, and it matches fields from the event to the columns in the lookup. So in this section, we are going to look at how to create a file-based lookup. We are going to look at three basically commands: lookup, input lookup, and output lookup. So now what I'm going to do next here is, the first thing I'm going to do here is I'm basically going to create a file-based lookup. So I go to the settings, I have knowledge object as lookups. I click on the lookups, and now I will click on add new. So you can see that my destination app will be search and reporting app. I will be selecting the CSV file. So in this particular case, prices.csv, and I will name it same as that prices.csv. I will click on save. So now I'm basically, so for example, you can see it here. I have got prices.csv as a file which we have already uploaded. The next thing I'm going to do is I'm again going to the knowledge object in the settings tab, and I will click on the lookups once again. So this time I'm basically going to create a lookup definition. So I will click on new lookup definition. Now again, I will be mentioning it as prices. And here I will be selecting the file which I have just uploaded, which is nothing but prices.csv. Okay. So it has already been taken care of. Now I will navigate back to my search and reporting app. So what I'm going to do here is, the first thing is I would like to make a due diligence. So for example, whether I am successfully able to retrieve the data with respect to my lookup file or not. So I would say input lookup and prices. So this is my CSV file, or this is the name of the definition, lookup file definition, which we have given to. So as you can see that I have made a use of input lookup, and I'm basically making the use of lookup file definition. So you can see that the data has already been retrieved. So you can also see some of the new fields. Price is one of them, product name is also one of them, and sale price is also one of them. You can also see the product ID. So just remember that product ID is one of the field which is quite unique, and which and the same field is also present in your index data as well. So now we are going to make a use of this. So uh, if I go here, so now what I'm going to do here is I will be making the use of index is equal to main. Again, the source type I will be making the use of access combined. So now what I'm going to do is I'm basically using a top command. Let's say top 3 product ID. I would say product ID, and I'm not interested in percentage. So I would say show pers is equal to false. So that is taken care of. Now what I'm going to make a use of, I'm also retrieving some of the fields which are present in our lookup file. So I would say lookup followed by the lookup definition. So I would say prices, and I will be looking up in my lookup table using the field which is present. So I would say product ID. If I say so, if I try to execute this particular search, you can see that I have basically got three top product IDs, and I'm also getting some other fields which are not really present in our indexes. So for example, the prices were not there, sale price was not there, and the product name is also not there. So I can also make a use of this particular field now. So for example, if I want to calculate stats, and I would say a sum, I would say sale price, and as total sales. So if I say like this, and if I click on executing this particular search, you can see that I have basically retrieved this particular data by utilizing the data which is already present in my lookup table definition or lookup table. So this is what I want to really cover in this demonstration. Hello, also we are at lesson number 6. We are going to explore creating reports and alerts. So I'm going to present and jump on how to create reports and schedule reports demonstration. Before that, a little bit of the theory. So report basically enables reusability of SPL searches. It can be saved, it can be scheduled to run at any time. It can also be shared by other users, and it can also be embedded in external websites. So without any delay, I will be moving on here. So my Splunk search will be like, index is equal to main, and I will be using a source type is equal to access combine. Now I'm only interested in so status not equal to 200, and I will say stats, I would say count by status. So I'm going to make a use of the simple command, and I will say all time. So since I am basically creating a report, and so mostly we will be interested in the statistics. I will ensure that I will run the report in the fast mode to save the compute, because your verbose option is extremely compute intensive, and therefore and since we are only interested in statistics, I will make sure that I'm running all the reports in the fast mode. So this is the simple report I'm trying to formulate. So what I can do next is I can click on save as button. I will select a report. For the title, I will say HTTP errors. Other than success. So I have also mentioned the title in the report. I have also mentioned the description. So you can basically mention a time range picker. It's by default it is yes, but you can also disable time range picker if you are trying to schedule a report. I will click on save. Now I have got into this particular tab. I can be able to mention the permissions. So just give me a second. So you can see by default I will be the owner. So so for example, you must be creating a knowledge object with respect to certain application, which is a one particular workspace itself, and you can also share the report with all the other applications as well. So for example, I can also be able to share with an application. I will run this particular report as an owner, and I will give a read only access to the everyone else, and for to the admins I will give a write only access so that they can be able to edit this particular report as well. So I will click on save. You can see that our report has already been scheduled. Uh, we have already saved this particular report but not yet schedule any kind of the report, right? So this is how we basically create a report. And now I would be letting you know how to schedule a report. So what I can do is I can click on edit schedule. So you can see that schedule report, I will enable this. So here I have multiple options. I can run this particular report every week, or run every hour, run every day. So, but I would highly recommend you can basically make a use of a cron schedule. So I will also be giving you an example of the cron schedule as well. So I will be moving on to my slide. So you can see that uh, it is just a basic description or basic details about cron format. So you can see that the very first the very first character basically represents a minute. The second character represents an hour. The third character basically represents day of the month. And you can also go ahead with the wildcards, which I try to mention in the slide itself. So in your spare time, try to have a look at this particular cron format, which might be helpful if you are trying to reschedule or schedule and report or alert by using a cron schedule. So some of the cron examples which you might want to have a look at before you really schedule a report by using this option. So I will go here. So what I can do here is for me, I will just make it a star. I will try to run this particular report every minute. So I will again mention is at star. And here I will be mentioning it as 1 to 59. So this particular report will be running every minute. I would specify the time range as all time, and I will leave the priority as default. And so for example, while I'm trying to schedule and report, uh, so for example, basically, I just wanted this particular report to be run every 5 minutes or every two. Okay, so I will just keep the schedule to run this particular report every minute. So let's not change that. So you can also see the trigger actions here. So for example, I should be able to log an event. I should be able to send this particular report as a part of the lookup file. I should be able to run a script as well. But for the time being, I am going to demonstrate how to send an email, right? So just give me a second. So I will be say cybersecnerd at. I will be sending to my email ID. I will be sending setting the priority as normal. You can see that in the subject it is basically the name, and in the message you can see the schedule report as a name. This and I will also be mentioning the description as well. So this is the message. I would say a description as well. So you can go to the Splunk description. You can go to the Splunk website as well, so that you should be able to know what are the tokens you should be able to use while sending in emails. And it is very, very important to give you any kind of the information with respect to that particular report, right? So now what I'm going to do is, so for example, a link to the results. So what I'm going to do is, I will be attaching this particular report in a CSV format. I will also be enabling this option inline, and I will keep it as default link to the report, link to the results. So I will keep it like as it is. And if I click on save, so this is the report I will be getting getting email in some point in time. So guys, I think the report has already been run, but however, I'm not able to get the email because of the trial license. So for example, I can click on edit schedule once again. So I have made a little bit of the change to really get a report. So for example, as of now 1850, so I can basically make it 51. But that is the part I really wanted to show you how you can basically schedule a report. But because of the trial license, probably that might not be allowed at this point in time. Thank you guys. So that's what I really wanted to cover in this section. I will be seeing you next where I will be demonstrating about creating alerts. Thank you. Hello all. In this section, we are going to cover the alerts, and let me go to the previous slide. So in this particular slide, we are basically looking at alerts. So alerts are just like reports, just remember. But however, there are certain additional features. So for example, you can also add a threshold so that your alert can get triggered, and alerts can also be throttled, but all the other things remain same. So these are some of the best practices. So you should not be scheduling or setting up the alerts very frequently, for example, every 5 minutes to eliminate noise. You should avoid a script alert action in one of the trigger actions. You should avoid triggering an alert for each condition, or avoid triggering an alert for each result. I would say you can use throttling, so that is recommended, and you can also make use of the global tokens to enhance the email content. So let me go back to my console now, and for the global tokens, you can basically use this particular link, and you can see that the name of the report and the description of the report. So that is quite usable if you use basically global tokens. So you can leverage this particular link for that. So let me move on to my console. So here I will be basically making the use of my basic search to create an alert. So again, source type, I will be making the use of same data source. So now what I'm saying is stats, and I will only be interested in status and is equal to, let's say, 5 star. I would say stats count as stats count as error. So this is the report. This is a basic report, and I will also be configuring as all time, and I will keep it as in a fast mode itself. If I execute this particular search, you can see that I have gotten a result. So what I can do here is I will go to the alert. So here I will be mentioning it as HTTP, let's say server error, server error under various categories. Okay, I will keep this particular report as you can keep it as private, or you can also share it in an app. If I click here, shared in app, you should be able to create or share this particular knowledge object with other applications as well. So I will be clicking on schedule, and I will, as recommended in the report section, I will be making a use of the cron schedule. And because we are basically making the use of the static data set, I mention the time range as all time, but normally for your reports, mostly it will be 24 hours or for an hour or so, or weekly probably. So cron job, let me schedule as 1930. So for example, 1924 here. So let me schedule it as 1930. So I would say 30 minutes past 19 hours. So hopefully that will be good. And here I will be mentioning it as star. So this is how I'm configuring a report, and you can also see the trigger conditions, number of the results. So I will always make a use of the custom. So I would say search error greater than 1000. So if this particular trigger condition has already been met, this particular alert will be getting triggered. You can also throttle this particular alert by using this. So for example, I mean, for example, if your alert is generating too much of the noise, you can also throttle your alert, but I will not be discussing about this in a very detail at this point in time. So I will be selecting action as in send an email. So again, cyber. So I will be making the use of global tokens as well. And here I will also mention the description. So let's say, and here I will be mentioning the description once again. So once the email is received, I will know what this particular alert is all about. I will be setting the condition as attach CSV inline table, link to the alert, trigger condition, allow empty result, attach PDF. So this is how I am going to save. I will click on save, and my alert has already been created. So now I will go to the permissions tab. So in the permissions tab, I would like to be the owner itself, but however, you can also share this particular permission. So if I click on app, I will give read only access to everyone else. And for the administrators, I will also give the write access as well. So you can see that at this point in time, this particular alert has already been created. And at this point in time, because I need to do some special settings with respect to my email server, if I go to the server settings here, I need to basically do the special settings. Therefore, I'm not really showing you because I also need to generate the app code password also. Therefore, I'm not really able to show you how the once we have received certain email, how it can be configured like that, right? So that's it for current section, and I will see you in the next section where we are going to create the dashboards. Good morning, all. So in this particular section, we are basically looking at creating dashboards, and so we will be starting with how we can basically create dashboards, and then we will try to configure drill down, and we will try to also see or insert input panels. So without a further ado, a little bit about dashboards. So dashboards, we will be displaying data panels in a coherent and intuitive way. And dashboard can be powered by your inline searches as well as reports. And you can also make dashboards interactive with the help of input panels and drill downs. So without a further ado, I will be moving on to my console. So the first thing I'm going to do here is, as you know that we are basically making the use of static data. So what I'm going to do here is I would say index is equal to main and my source type, I would say access combined. Just give me a second. Source type should be access combined. Now what I'm going to do next is I'm just going to count the logs with respect to this particular source. So that's the only thing I'm going to do as of now. So if I say stats count, you can see that I have gotten the result. So why not I make this particular count into the dashboard itself. So if I go here and if I try to create a new dashboard, you can see that I've got certain options. So what I'm going to do here is my dashboard title should be a web traffic, I would say analysis, and the similar kind of the description I'm going to give in the description as well. So now it is basically asking me the permissions. So as we have seen for the reports and alerts as well, I can either make this particular dashboard private, which can only be visible to me, or I should be able to share it with other users in a form of app as well. So for the time being, I will keep it private. And I will be clicking on classic dashboards. So now we have got two options, but just for the sake of the simplicity, I will be going ahead with the classic dashboards option. So if I go down, I will also give the panel title. I would say web, total traffic. So let's say web traffic analysis 2, I will saving to the dashboard. You can see that the dashboard has already been created. So you can see that this is our dashboard, right? So now what I can do here is I can try to make one more report. So let's go ahead and you can see that add a panel. So I would say add a panel. So what I can do here is I can basically also make a use of report here as well. So as I was discussing in the presentation slide, we can basically make a use of either in inline search, or we can also make a use of an existing report. So if I click on new from report, you can see that we have got one particular reports which basically talks about HTTP errors. So I will click add to the dashboard. So now you can see that I have got two, and I will just click on save. So now you can see that I have got two input panels in this particular dashboard which says web traffic analysis. Let me click on edit. So I also talk about you can also rearrange your dashboard. So what I can do here is if I try to drag and drop. So if I try to drag and drop, just give me a second. Similarly, if I try to, yeah, now you can see that. So we have just rearranged our dashboard to look a little more simpler. Now what I can do here is I can also enable a dark theme here. So now you can see if I click on save, my dashboard will be saved. So if I click on refresh, it will take an effect. So it is basically taking a little bit of time, but now you can see that we can see our dashboard. Now what I can do here is I would like to edit further. So now for this particular title, I will click on select visualization. Just for the better visualization, I will be selecting a single value. You can see the single value, and similarly here also I will be making the changes. So for example, I think this particular table will look even better if I were try to make a use of a pie chart. So just give me a second. If I click on save, so now you can see that our dashboard is looking a little more live or a little more interactive. So that's what we intend to do. So if I click on edit dashboard once again, you can also see source. So here you can see all the XML code as well. So for example, if you really want to change the title of the dashboard, you can do it from here. So if I say I'm just making a cosmetic change, if I say final and if I click on save, so you can see that the title of our dashboard has already been changed. So this particular XML option or using source is very, very good if you really are into the content development, and if you do or if you develop dashboards day in, day out, you can really play around with these kinds of features. So I will click on cancel. And so these are the two things I am really would like to walk you through in this particular demonstration, and I will see you in the next video. Hello all, in this section we are going to explore adding drill down. So we have created a dashboard in the previous section. So this time we will try to make it more interactive. So let me move back to my console. So this is the dashboard which we have created previously. I will click. So if you can see that this is the dashboard. So just give me a little bit of second. If I say edit and if I go to the drill down and I would say link to the search, I would say no action. I So what I'm going to show you here is, so at this point in time, if I try to point to one of the slice of the pie chart, you can see the corresponding status and you can also see the statistics corresponding to that. If I try to click, nothing really happens because we have not really associated a drill down with respect to our input panel. So if I click on edit as an option, and you can see here in the three dots, you can see edit drill down. I will click on that. If I try to make changes to the link to the search, now you can see that I have selected auto. This is the default one. If I try to click on apply and I will click on save changes, I will try to load the dashboard once again. So what happens here is if I try to click on the slice of the pie chart corresponding to the status is equal to 400, let me see if we are able to see the different results this time. So you can see that we have been getting redirected to the search console, and you can see that this is the search which has automatically gotten constructed. And if I try to click on the status, you can see the status is equal to 400, so we are able to see all the events which has got status is equal to 400, right? So this is one of the way of doing it. If I try to get back to my dashboard screen, so this is what I have taken you through the default option. So let me try to make one more changes this time. So again, I will try to click on three dots and edit drill down. So now we have used auto as an option. We can also use custom as an option. So what we can see is we can see the default search here. I can make the changes in this particular SPL command here. So I am going to make changes with respect to that. I would say status, I would say dollar, I would say click, I would say dot value, again dollar. So now what happens is if we try to click, so let's say I'm not really interested in events corresponding to status is equal to 400. I really wanted to see all the item IDs for which I have got status is equal to 400 as an error, right? So what I can do here is let me try to make a change in this particular search. I would say top item ID. So this is the change we are making, and here I will be making the use of time range picker. I will be selecting all time, so that is fine, and click on apply. So I will click on save this time once again, and I will try to reload the dashboard once again. So if I do that, let me try to see whether we are getting the intended result this time or not. If I click on our dashboard, date and time range. So yeah, so I think that we have got certain challenges once again. So I need to make sure that we have selected all time in our drill down section or not. So you can see I have used a time range picker, that is fine, and custom time. So here I need to select it as an all time. So if I got presets, I will selecting it as all time. So we have not really selected the all time. That is why our search was getting invalid. So I will try to reload the dashboard once again. If I try to make the changes, whatever I have made in our dashboard. So let me try to click on this result once again. Hopefully it will give us the intended result. So you can see that now I have also made a use of global tokens. So click.value is one of the token which we have used. So this is what I really wanted to cover, how we can basically make use of interactive drill down or input panels to make our dashboards really really more interactive. So I will see you in our next section. Hello all. So we are at the very last part of our demonstration, and we are basically looking at how to add input panels to our existing dashboard. So we are going to cover how to add time range picker as an input, and then we are going to cover the drop down, which is mostly used. So without any delay, I will be moving on to the console. So you can see this is the web console, and this is the query I am going to make a use of. So what I can do is I'm just changing the tab, and I will be running this result. I will select all time. So we have gotten the result. Now I would say a new dashboard. So let's name it as product performance, and I will keep it as private. I will select classic dashboards, and then the panel name I would say product revenue. If I save to the dashboard, and if I click on view dashboard, we will be getting our dashboard which we have just created using inline search. You can see this dashboard is not very interactive as it doesn't give you any input option for a time range picker or drill down. So I can click on edit. So now what I can do here is, if you can see, add input. So first time I am going to do a time. So you if I click on this pencil button, so here I will say select time. I will check mark again search on change, and I will be making this particular field as blank, and I will keep the default as last 24 hours. I will click on apply. So I need to make one more change. So if I try to click on edit search, so what I can do here is I need to select basically share time picker global. If I click on apply, so mostly our dashboard will be ready, and we should be getting input time as an option. So if I try to load this particular dashboard, you can see that no results found because our data is static. And if I really change it to the all time, you can see that this particular data is getting uploaded as a result. If I click on edit once again, now I will be demonstrating drop down as an input panel. If I click on edit, I will say a select product, and I will again check mark again search on change. I will keep the field as field 1, or we can basically make a change in the name of the field name as well. So let's say token, I would say product, I would say underscore name. So this is the change I will be making. So now we have two options, static as well as dynamic. So for the simplicity of use, first of all, we will be seeing static as an option. I would say Dream Crusher. And similarly, I copy this value in the value field as well. And similarly, I will also take world of cheese. And there is a typo. So let me paste it here as well. So these are the dynamic options, World of Cheese, Dream Crusher. If I scroll up, so I will select a Dream Crusher as a default option. And if I go down, I have not really made any changes with respect to dynamic options as well. So if I click on apply, so now I need to make one more change with respect to the drill down so that it should be working as intended. So here I will be adding one more line. I will say search. I will say product is equal to inside double quotes. I would say dollar dollar and here token product name and I will click on apply. So if I try to save this particular dashboard, let us try to look whether we are getting the result as intended or not. So I will try to upload that, refresh that particular page once again. So let me select all time. So you can see that I'm getting a revenue for Dream Crusher as a product. If I try to change the product World of Cheese, and I'm getting the intended result as well, corresponding revenue figures for this particular product as well. So now I'm going to demonstrate the dynamic option as well. So if I click on pencil or edit button, so I will go to the dynamic options. So what I'm going to do here is just give me a second. I'm just copying some of the index and these things. What I'm going to do here next is I will say stats, I would say count, I would say by product name. And I need to copy one more thing because we are also making the use of lookup. So let me do that. So if I go back here, so let me So now hopefully it should work. And if I click on apply stats, so yes. So what I'm trying to basically include all the product name which were there. So for example, in the static options we have included only two options. So at this time I'm basically making the use of inline search so that we can get the list of all the product names which are available. So in this particular field as well, in the label field, in the value field, I will be giving product name because we are grouping by this particular field in question. Okay, so one more thing I need to make a change. So we can either make a use of static option or dynamic option. So I will be closing this. And what I can do here is I can basically mention all, and here I will be making the use of wildcard. If I try to apply and if I try to click save, let's say whether we are getting the so for example, let's refresh the page as well. So now you can see we are not getting any result. So I will select all time. And if I go here, you can see if I select all, it is basically giving me all the options, all the products, and I can see the corresponding revenue figures against them. And similarly, I can make a use of any other product, for example, Dream Crusher. So I will be having a corresponding result as well. I can make one more change here. So for example, if I go to the edit option, so by default, if we are not basically making the use of drill down, so let's make this particular change. And I would say apply. If I click on save, if I try to refresh my page, so if I select all time and you can yeah, you can see that again I'm getting all the options. And so this particular all button should be in my default option as of now. Probably the settings might not have been applied, but I just wanted to demonstrate that, for example, if you are not selecting any product name from the drop down, it will be by default all the product names. So this is what we really wanted to cover in this particular demonstration. So, and this is the very last slide. So I would like to thank you once again, and just let me know the feedback by your likes, comments, shares, and views. So we have covered all the lesson 7, and I will also be including timestamp so that you can check out a certain lesson if you are interested. And thank you.